Hello everyone, and welcome to Fresh Master Channel. Today, we are going to have some story from Reddit. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed it, and leave a comment down below. These simple clips will mean a lot to the future of this channel.
Rick got his finance degree and landed a job at the local branch of Washington Mutual, a bank that was blowing up in the early 2000s. It was 2003, and the mortgage game was on fire. Some weeks, he was closing a dozen home loans, not to mention second mortgages and equity lines. Everyone was buying houses or cashing in on their home's value to snag boats, cars, even backyard pools. Stuff regular working folks used to only dream about. Rick felt good. He was making decent money and helping people live bigger lives. Then, about a year out of college, he met Stacy Wallace. It happened on a sunny Saturday. Rick was out in the outfield, batting fourth in his adult baseball league, when he spotted a pretty brunette up in the stands. Tight top, long legs, and summer shorts, and she was sitting next to the wife of one of his teammates. After the game, Jeff and his wife Jenny introduced Rick to her. Her name was Stacy, and they all decided to grab drinks at the pub around the corner. At the bar, Rick and Stacy sat alone at a table, while Jeff and Jenny chatted up another couple near the bar. It was a little awkward at first, until Stacy broke the silence. "Okay, so this is like, what, the third time they've tried to set me up?" she said, rolling her eyes. Rick laughed. "They're not even trying to be slick about it. But hey, I'm not mad. You?" She grinned. Her eyes sparkled when she did. "Nope. Better than last time, honestly. That guy was such a tool. Wouldn't shut up about himself." Rick raised his glass. "Guess he thought bragging would win you over." "Well, he failed," she said. "Now you? Flattery over ego? That your move?" Rick chuckled. "Only if it's working." Stacy blushed hard. "Sorry, that came out wrong. I'm kind of nervous." "Nervous? Trust me, I've been sweating bullets since Jenny pointed you out during the game and told me we'd be hanging after." She tilted her head, curious. "Why nervous?" Rick looked her over. She was gorgeous, but didn't act like she knew it. "Come on. Look at you. You're beautiful." Now it was Rick's turn to blush. "Oh, great," she teased. "We're just going to trade compliments back and forth all night?" Just then, Jeff and Jenny came back to the table. Jenny looked concerned, like she was bracing for another failed matchmaking attempt. "What'd we miss?" she asked. Jeff groaned. "Told you not to play Cupid again," but Stacy cut in, smiling. "Thank God you're back. We were about to start ranking each other's pickup lines." Jenny squinted. "Come with me. I need the bathroom." She grabbed Stacy's hand and whisked her away. Rick gave Jeff a look. "Bathroom?" Jeff just shrugged. "Don't ask, man. 3 years with her, I've learned to pick my battles." Rick waved down a waitress and ordered another round. "I like her," he said once she walked off. "She's smart, funny, and those eyes." Jeff raised an eyebrow. "Jenny will be thrilled. Her matchmaking record's iffy." "So, what's the deal? Why's Stacy still single?" Jeff leaned back. "Same reason you are. Too many users, not enough good ones out there." "Well, you clearly found one. I envy you and Jenny." Jeff smiled. "She's a handful, but yeah, I got lucky." "So, how'd I do?" Rick nodded toward the bathroom door. Jeff smirked. "Buddy, from what I saw, you passed. You two had some serious chemistry." Just then, Stacy and Jenny came back, both smiling. Stacy scooted her chair a little closer to Rick. That was all the confirmation he needed. They ended up staying for another couple hours. Drinks, jokes, good conversation. That night kicked off something real. Rick and Stacy officially became a thing. She taught high school English and took grad classes in the summer. Rick was grinding 50-plus hours a week at the bank, sometimes working evenings too. But they always carved out time for each other. Weekends, a couple nights during the week. They made it work. Their relationship kept growing. Like any solid love story, there were bumps. The biggest one? Stacy's dad, Colonel Wallace. The guy was old school military, hard as nails, and had zero respect for men who never served. Rick thought about explaining why he didn't enlist, but figured it wouldn't matter. The colonel had made up his mind about lazy civilians. Luckily, Stacy didn't share her dad's hardline views, and the colonel kept his distance, for now. Sex wasn't fireworks from day one. They were both still figuring things out. But they genuinely tried to make each other happy, and their connection went deeper than the physical. They shared values, dreams, and long talks about the future. 2 kids or 3, raise them Catholic or Methodist? Didn't matter. What mattered was raising them right. with decency and a moral compass in a world that didn't always make sense. 6 months into dating, 5 months after they swore off everyone else, Rick popped the question. Stacy said yes without hesitation. 4 months later, they were husband and wife, off to Jamaica for their honeymoon. Rick never told anyone, but the single hottest moment of his life happened that week. One morning, his sweet, modest new wife slipped off her bikini top while sunbathing on a crowded beach. A few other women had done the same, so Stacy worked up the nerve. Rick's jaw almost hit the sand. His eyes practically bugged out like something out of an old cartoon, which only made Stacy laugh harder. That trip was paradise. Sun, surf, bottomless drinks, tropical nights. It was the kind of start every couple dreams of. Rick kept looking at her thinking, how did I get this lucky? One afternoon, as they floated in the clear water, he looked into her eyes. Same color as the Caribbean, and thought, yeah, I could do life with this woman. Gray hair, bad backs, wrinkled hands. Just as long as those eyes still looked at me like that. Later that night, watching her undress from a sun-kissed dinner dress, he knew deep down he'd hit the jackpot. Stacy hadn't been with many guys before Rick, just 2. She'd made it through high school and even the first chunk of college without having sex. Those 2 guys, meh, awkward, clueless. Rick, though, he cared. He paid attention. He made it count. When they got back home, they were full of plans, practical ones. They weren't dumb, just hopeful. They wanted to build a future with their eyes wide open. And sure, it's easy to say they made mistakes looking back. But when Wall Street, Congress, the Fed, the whole damn financial machine didn't see the crash coming, can you really blame 2 young people for missing it too? It was 2007. Home prices were out of control, and Rick and Stacy got swept up in the madness. Renting felt like throwing money away, so they bought a house. Not a mansion, just a basic 3-bed duplex. Problem was, that same house probably went for $200K a few years earlier. They paid $420K after winning a bidding war. Their real estate agent told them they got a deal. Right after signing the mortgage, Stacy had an idea. Why not quit her job for a year, finish her master's in one go, and get pregnant while she was at it? That way, she'd be home with the baby, then go back to work with a better salary and a promotion. They laid it all out: schedules, money, backup plans. On paper, it made perfect sense. Rick was killing it at work. He'd just gotten a raise and a fat bonus. They could afford the plan. Everything was on track. Almost. End of November, Stacy told him she was 3 weeks late. She'd bought a pregnancy test. It came back positive. Baby was due in July. Perfect timing. She'd get a couple of months at home before jumping back into teaching. The stars had lined up. But life doesn't follow spreadsheets. By April 2008, the mortgage market started tanking. Rick's bank, Washington Mutual, started cutting branches and laying people off, especially mortgage guys. Rick got the axe. It took 5 months before he found another job, as an assistant manager at a discount store. Half the pay, garbage hours, split days off. Not exactly the career move they'd planned for. On May 15th, Stacy went into labor early, 7 weeks early. Baby Amy came into the world tiny and fragile. They couldn't bring her home for 3 weeks. Hospital bills piled up fast. Rick's emergency insurance covered some of it, but nowhere near what his old job's plan would have handled. Stacy powered through and finished her degree. She got a position teaching English at the local high school, which gave her a 10-week window with Amy before school started. Her mom stepped up to help with childcare while Rick worked the early shifts. 2 incomes, sure, but not enough. Their mortgage was underwater. Selling wasn't even an option. Amy had issues. Colic, chronic ear infections, screaming at night. None of them were sleeping. Stress piled on. Physical closeness? Gone. Between Rick's back and forth shift changes and barely seeing each other on days off, they drifted. The couple who used to laugh over wine and movie nights now felt more like stressed-out roommates. The cracks in their marriage deepened during Stacy's 2nd year of teaching. That's when Kyle Turner showed up. He was the new gym teacher, and the kind of guy you noticed. 6'3", 220 pounds, built like a linebacker. Blonde hair, always with a perfectly scruffy jawline, like he walked straight out of a fitness commercial. Even the older teachers whispered about him after that first faculty meeting. And that's where the next chapter started. It was mid-August, still 2 weeks before the students would return. And the school building had that quiet buzz only teachers know. The hum of printers, the scent of dry erase markers, coffee cups abandoned in cluttered classrooms, and teachers. dressed more like they were heading to brunch than to work. The mood was relaxed, casual. Summer hadn't fully let go of its grip. Stacy dressed accordingly. She wore a pair of tailored tan shorts. Nothing scandalous, but fitted enough to show off her long, athletic legs, now tanned and toned from morning jogs and stroller walks with Amy. Her top was light cotton, white with thin vertical stripes, sleeveless, and just open enough at the neckline that if she leaned forward, someone might catch a subtle glimpse of cleavage. Not enough to get her called into the principal's office, but definitely enough to feel pretty. After months of new mom chaos, after struggling with sleep and stretch marks and self-esteem, Stacy finally felt like herself again. Strong, put together, desirable even. So when she noticed a stranger sitting near the back of the staff meeting, tall, broad-shouldered, sitting there like he owned the room, it made her stomach flip in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. He was something else. Kyle Turner. From the moment she walked in, Kyle had his eyes on her. He wasn't shy about it either. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, giving off this easy confidence, like the kind of guy who's never had to chase anything in his life. His gaze lingered, not lewd, not awkward, just intentional. He saw the legs, the curves, the wedding ring. The ring didn't throw him off. If anything, it made her more interesting. Kyle liked married women. No mess, no expectations, no late-night crying about commitment. Married women already had their story. Kyle liked slipping into the side plot. From that day, Kyle began the slow, deliberate game of getting into Stacy's world. He didn't flirt outright, didn't compliment her looks or slide into her DMs with stupid winks. He just kept showing up, in hallways, in shared breaks, at the copier. Quiet, smooth, and timed just right. It helped that people were already talking. A rumor spread fast. No one knew who started it, but the story went that Kyle was ex-military. Special Forces. Maybe a Ranger, maybe a SEAL. Some said he served in Afghanistan. Others swore he was stationed overseas, doing missions too classified to talk about. It didn't matter. People believed it. He had the build for it, the posture, the silent strength. He looked like a guy who'd seen things. Kyle never denied the rumors. He didn't confirm them either, just gave a tight smile, shrugged, and changed the subject. The mystery only made him more magnetic. People love a story, especially one you don't fully tell. In reality, Kyle had spent 3 years in the Navy stationed in a supply warehouse in Kansas. He hated the military life from day one. His job kept him out of danger, away from the real action, but close to the base gym where he spent 2 hours a day chiseling his physique. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave him the body and the presence of someone who'd been through hell, and he knew how to let people believe what they wanted. By the end of the second week, the fates, or the schedule planner, put Kyle and Stacy in the same time block for their pre-lunch prep period. That meant they had 30 minutes in the middle of the day, just the two of them with nothing scheduled. No students, no duties, just free time. Kyle didn't waste the opportunity. "You work out?" he asked one morning, wiping sweat off his neck after a jog around the track. "Sometimes," Stacy said, sipping her iced coffee. "Not as much as I used to." He grinned. "Well, Tuesdays and Thursdays, the gym's open. I usually have it to myself. If you're serious about getting back into it, we could do some light stuff, no pressure. Beats working out next to the dude who grunts every time he lifts 30 pounds like it's a truck axle." Stacy laughed. She had been missing the gym, but hated crowded places. The idea of working out without an audience, just her and Kyle, was oddly appealing. "All right," she said, "Tuesdays and Thursdays." And just like that, it became a routine. 2 days a week, they met in the gym. She brought a change of clothes, tied her hair up, and let herself slip into those sessions like it was therapy. They stretched together, passed medicine balls, spotted each other on planks and weighted squats. It stayed professional, but there were moments, fingers brushing, eyes meeting just a little too long, laughter that stuck around even after it should have faded. Then one day in early February, Kyle changed the energy. "Hey," he said, handing her a water bottle. "I've been working on something, off the record." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah?" "I've been writing," he said casually. "A novel. First draft's done, just wondering if you'd be willing to read it. Tell me what works, what doesn't." Stacy was surprised, but not dismissive. She was an English teacher after all. She liked helping. But more than that, she was intrigued. "I didn't know you wrote." Kyle shrugged. "Most people don't." "What's it about?" He smiled, slow and unreadable. "It's a war story, but I'd rather you just read it. No spoilers. She nodded. All right, bring it in. That night, after dinner, Rick headed off to the store for his closing shift, and Amy was finally asleep upstairs. Stacy poured herself a glass of white wine, curled up on the couch with a blanket, and opened the manuscript. It was called Through Sand and Fire. The main character, Tyler, a Navy SEAL, quiet, haunted, rugged. He had a tragic backstory and the kind of grit you didn't earn without seeing hell firsthand. The writing wasn't polished, but it was intense, personal. Stacy found herself scribbling notes in the margins, circling words, underlining lines that made her stop. Halfway through, she caught herself wondering if Tyler was just Kyle's alter ego. The name even seemed like a hybrid of Turner and Kyle. Coincidence? Maybe. But it was hard to believe Kyle hadn't done that on purpose. The next evening, same setup. Amy down for the night, Rick at work. Stacy picked up where she left off. The second half of the story took Tyler on leave. 3 weeks in Italy after a long, brutal deployment. That's where the novel took a sharp, seductive turn. In Amalfi, Tyler and his buddy Greg met 2 French girls, Michelle and Leslie. There were drinks on the coast, dancing at night, yacht trips under a hot Mediterranean sun. The details were vivid. Too vivid. Stacy felt her pulse quicken as she read. She wasn't just reading anymore. She was there, on the yacht. In the water, watching Michelle take off her bikini top, feeling Tyler's hands on her hips as he lifted her out of the ocean like she weighed nothing. She dropped her pen. Her hand drifted under the waistband of her pajama pants before she could even think to stop herself. The chapter didn't spell out every detail, but it didn't need to. It left just enough to the imagination, enough to feel the heat between the words. Michelle was 5'7", lean but curvy, brown hair slicked back, blue eyes hiding behind aviators. Tyler watched her, not in a crude way, but with reverence, like her body was the first thing he'd truly seen in months, maybe years. They swam, they kissed, they disappeared onto the lower deck, fade to black. Stacy wasn't sure what to make of the sex scenes in Kyle's manuscript. They felt a little awkward, a little over the top, but then again, she'd never really read romance novels or erotica for that matter. So who was she to judge? She figured maybe it was supposed to feel exaggerated, sensual, bold. Whatever it was, it caught her off guard. In one scene, the lovers, Tyler and Michelle, kissed beneath the afternoon sun, skins still glistening from their swim. Then they started laughing like teenagers, and Michelle leaned too far back on Tyler's lap and tumbled off into the water with a splash. Tyler didn't even hesitate. He grinned and dove in after her. By the time they both climbed back on deck, dripping and laughing, Greg and Leslie strolled out from the cabin, completely undressed. Stacy blinked, surprised, then read on. Leslie, cool as ever, tugged Michelle inside the cabin for a minute. Tyler and Greg just stood there, still undressed themselves, wondering what the hell came next. Then came the offer. Michelle reappeared, voice light and casual like they were discussing dinner plans. So, we were hoping you two might want to spend your whole 3-week vacation with us. On the yacht. We'll swing by the shore, you can grab your bags, and then we're off to tour the Mediterranean. What do you say? Greg looked at Tyler. Tyler looked at Greg. They nodded like they were reading each other's minds. Hell yes, they said in unison. That was the start of the wildest vacation these fictional seals had ever had. Stacy flipped the page. The story didn't hold back. Kyle had clearly gone all in. The next chapters were a full-on fantasy. The sex scenes were graphic, but not crude. Detailed, almost poetic. A little theatrical, sure, but Stacy found herself getting pulled into it. And slowly, something shifted. Every time she read the name Michelle, her brain swapped it out for her own. She wasn't just reading anymore. She was imagining herself on that yacht with Tyler's hands on her skin, Tyler whispering her name. She read the passage about the two of them making love under the stars on the ship's bridge, undressed, salty skin cooled by the night breeze, eyes tracing constellations while their bodies pressed together, and she just couldn't keep reading. She dropped the pages on the bed and closed her eyes. Her mind filled with Kyle's image, his voice, his smile, his rough palms and confident smirk. She imagined him holding her the way Tyler held Michelle, kissing her the way Tyler kissed. And this time she didn't stop herself. She didn't tell herself it was just fiction or that it didn't mean anything. It took less than 10 minutes for her breathing to return to normal, even longer to stop trembling. 2 days later, She brought Kyle his marked-up manuscript. Her cheeks were pink the moment she stepped into the gym. She handed him the folder, trying not to make eye contact. Kyle saw it instantly. The story had worked exactly how he wanted. She was flustered, nervous, lips pressed tight to keep from saying the wrong thing. "You finish it?" he asked, grin already forming. Stacy nodded, barely meeting his eyes. "Yeah, it's a great story. Really strong for a first draft. I made a few notes, nothing major, a couple of suggestions, and maybe I went a little overboard on the Zex scene feedback." Kyle chuckled. "Oh, come on. You didn't think that part worked?" Stacy blushed deeper. "No, it worked. It worked too well, maybe. I just wasn't expecting it." He stepped a little closer. "Well, I always believe Zex between two consenting adults can bring something real into a story. A little heat, a little edge. Sometimes it even changes people." The way he said it, real life, not just fiction, it wasn't subtle, not even a little. Stacy caught the undertone, felt it hit right in her chest. He wasn't just talking about characters anymore, and she didn't want to admit it, but it made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Wanted. If there was any lingering doubt about Kyle's intentions, it vanished right then and there. The look in his eyes didn't ask. It told. If she wasn't married, he'd have already had her in his bed. And that night, lying awake next to a snoring Rick, Stacy began asking herself questions she'd never let surface before. Why did I marry so young? Was Rick ever really the right man for me? What's he done with his life? Why does he feel so small compared to Kyle? Kyle was bold, direct, a man who took what he wanted. Rick, meanwhile, was tired, dull, drained. He asked permission for everything. Kyle didn't ask, he told. And little by little, Stacy's attitude toward Rick soured. Conversations shrank to short exchanges about Amy's diaper schedule or grocery lists. There were no more soft moments, no more stolen glances, just the shell of a routine. While their marriage quietly crumbled at home, things between Stacy and Kyle simmered at school. It started as flirtation, but it didn't stay that way for long. Danielle Miller, a sharp-tongued biology teacher and Kyle's next-door neighbor, noticed. She saw the smirks in the hallway, the inside jokes, the extra time spent prepping together, and she didn't like it one bit. Danielle had history with Kyle. Brief, sure, but still real. They hooked up for a couple weeks early in the school year. Then Kyle ghosted her cold the minute Stacy started looking his way. Danielle wasn't just pissed, she was humiliated. Dropped like a bad habit for the school's new golden girl. And it stung worse when Stacy beat her out for the women's tennis coach position that spring. Danielle had seniority, experience, and even helped rewrite the athletic handbook. But the job went to Stacy. Miss Perfect. Miss Size 4 waist and blue eyes. Kyle's first mistake? Messing around at work. His second? Underestimating Danielle. His third? Not realizing Danielle's uncle was a sitting U.S. congressman with access to just about anything, including military records. A week after Danielle made a quiet call to Uncle Fred, she had everything she needed. Kyle Turner, the mystery man, was exposed for what he really was, a glorified box mover in a Navy supply depot. No combat, no medals, just smooth lies and a six-pack. And Danielle? She waited. She watched the chemistry between Kyle and Stacy build and build, never interfering. Not yet. She was patient, calculated. She knew this wouldn't be over until it crossed the line, and when it did, she'd burn it all to the ground. 6 weeks after Stacy read that story, Kyle was done playing coy. He cornered her in the gym one Thursday, voice low and firm. "You've been teasing me long enough," he said. "I made us a reservation. Dinner, Carmen's, Thursday night." She blinked. "Thursday's my book club." "I know," Kyle said smoothly. "I read your planner. Carmen's at 7, and after that, we go across the street to the Hilton." Her heart was racing now. He wasn't asking. He was telling. Kyle moved closer, eyes locked on hers. "I want to give you something real, something you haven't had in a long time." And Stacy, she didn't argue, didn't protest. All she could think about was how decisive he was. Confident, the opposite of Rick. Rick, who tiptoed around everything. Kyle didn't need permission, he just acted. She had one question. "Why the Hilton?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Why not your place?" Kyle leaned in, lips near her ear. "There are 3 teachers in my building. Don't think you want them watching you sneak out the next morning. Not yet, anyway. While you're still married to that loser." That word, loser, hit her like a slap she didn't even mind. Stacy found herself smiling. Kyle, in his twisted way, was being thoughtful. It didn't even cross her mind to defend Rick, to protect him, to stop. Kyle grinned to himself as she walked away, a subtle sway in her hips. He'd played the game perfectly, fed her just enough fantasy to reel her in. And the best part, he didn't mean a word of it. There was no future, no promises, just another conquest in progress. And soon, Stacy Wilson would be his latest chapter. Stacy was already behind schedule. The girls were waiting on the court for practice to start. But her mind was elsewhere, spinning with anticipation, nerves, guilt, and adrenaline. She made a decision, sharp and fast, like ripping off a Band-Aid. "It's a date," she texted Kyle. Thursday morning started like any other. Stacy and Rick stood in the kitchen, quietly sipping coffee. The air between them was heavy and silent. Amy, perched in her booster seat, was more animated than both of them combined, smashing Cheerios into milk, giggling as she launched bits of cereal across the table like tiny grenades. Stacy sipped from her mug, already mentally checked out, already rehearsing the lie she had to sell. "Rick," she began, her voice even, but a bit too rehearsed. "Don't forget, I've got book club tonight after tennis practice. So you'll need to pick Amy up from my mom's before 6. Feed her. I'll be back by 10. Rick nodded without much thought. "I can handle it. What book are you discussing tonight?" That question caught Stacy off guard. She paused for a split second, blinked, and took another sip to buy herself time. Her tone shifted, just slightly, tight around the edges. "Water for elephants. Why?" Rick raised an eyebrow, sensing something off. "Just making conversation. Thought I'd show some interest, that's all." That stung a little, and not because he was wrong. It was the way he said it, low, resigned. He wasn't angry, just tired. Tired of trying. Rick grabbed his lunch, kissed the top of Amy's head with a soft, automatic affection, and walked out the door without another word. Stacy stared at the door after it clicked shut. At first, her chest tightened in irritation. He just leaves without saying goodbye? But then something else hit her. When was the last time I said something kind to him? She couldn't remember. Just before first period, Kyle showed up in her classroom, leaning into the doorway with that cocky smirk like he owned the place. He checked the hallway, made sure no one was around, then spoke in a low, honeyed tone. "Reservations locked in for 6 o'clock, Carmen's. And I got a room across the street at the Hilton. Don't be late. We've got a lot of time to make up for. Just the two of us." "I need to be home by 10, Stacy replied, her voice playful, laced with nerves. "Should we skip dinner?" Kyle grinned. "Nice try, but I'm not skipping dinner with you. I want wine, good food, and 0 interruptions. Then, dessert." "Wine and no kids, don't tempt me," she whispered, her smile forced, but believable. "Now get out of here before someone hears you." Somehow she held it together all day. Barely. Her nerves were stretched thin, but she made it through her classes, then practice, acting like everything was normal. When tennis wrapped, she let the girls go a few minutes early, pretending she had errands. Really, she just needed them gone. She waited until the locker room was completely empty before she opened her bag. Inside was the outfit, the one she hadn't worn in almost 3 years. A little black dress, the same one she wore to the Crystal Room when Rick had taken her out for New Year's Eve, back when they still splurged on nice things. Back when Rick still made reservations and she still got butterflies. She slipped it on with practiced ease. It still fit like a dream. Maybe even better than before. She added over-the-knee stockings, sheer and dark, and the 4-inch heels that had collected dust at the back of her closet. Her hair was swept into a sleek ponytail. No time for washing, just precision, control. She gave herself one last look in the mirror. Her eyes lingered on the curves, the way the fabric hugged her hips. Kyle's gonna lose his damn mind, she thought. And then, like a whisper, "I deserve this." Her school day clothes were tucked neatly in a small suitcase. She'd planned to shower and change at the Hilton before returning home. Everything was thought out, hidden, sealed. She locked the gym doors and stepped into the cool dusk air, heels tapping across the concrete as she made her way to her car. That's when a blue Honda came pulling into the lot, tires crunching gravel. Her heart dropped. Angel Martinez, one of her seniors and a player on the tennis team, jumped out of the car. "Mrs. Wilson, thank God I caught you," Angel called, rushing toward her. "I left my ethics notes and textbook in my locker, and I have a quiz tomorrow. Can you let me in real quick?" Stacy's face flushed with panic. She felt like a kid caught shoplifting. "Yeah, of course," she said, masking her nerves. "Come on, I'll unlock it." As they walked back to the locker room, Angel kept chatting away, oblivious. "You look really elegant tonight, Mrs. Wilson. On a Thursday. Are you and Mr. Wilson going out? Anniversary?" Stacy forced a smile. "Something like that." Angel kept going, undeterred. "My parents used to dress up for date nights. I hated it when I was a kid. Mom would wear something kind of hot and Dad'd be in a blazer. They'd come home all lovey-dovey and I'd be like, 'Gross, get a room.'" Stacy laughed lightly, trying to keep things normal. "But now," Angel continued, "now I think it's kind of beautiful. They've been married like 20 years, and they're still all over each other. It's cool, you know?" Stacy stood quietly as Angel grabbed her things. They walked back out together, and just before climbing into her car, Angel looked at her and said, "Have fun tonight, Mrs. Wilson. I saw your husband once. He's cute. Makes sense, I guess, why you're doing so great." And she smiled and drove off. Stacy stood there frozen, hand on the door handle of her car, heart thudding in her chest. And then it hit her, the guilt, the shame, the crushing weight of what she was about to do. She dropped into the driver's seat and started crying. Messy, loud sobs she couldn't stop. Her words came out in fragments, whispered through shaking breaths. "What the hell am I doing? What is wrong with me? I told myself I deserved this." "Deserved what? To throw away my family?" Her mascara smudged under her eyes as the sobs racked her body. It took her 10 full minutes to pull herself together. She didn't even realize her dress was clinging to her damp skin from the heat and tears. She didn't care. She put the keys in the ignition, turned the wheel, and pulled out of the parking lot, not toward the restaurant, not toward the Hilton. She was going home. She didn't even think about how she looked. All she wanted was to hold her daughter and wrap her arms around the man she had nearly betrayed. Rick had been down all day. He couldn't stop thinking about how his life had become such a burden. Where had the joy gone? Everything just felt like weight. The little pleasures that used to make things bearable had slowly disappeared, especially the connection, the love he and Stacy once had. He'd managed to hold it together for most of the last 2 years. He felt like he owed that much to his daughter. He had to be strong for Amy. But for the last 6 months or so, Stacy hadn't been able to look him in the eyes. She didn't show him love anymore. Not the kind he needed. That afternoon, Rick left work earlier than usual. "Screw this," he thought to himself. He briefly considered stopping by the pub for a pint before heading to his mother-in-law's to pick up Amy. But instead, he decided to head home and enjoy a little peace and quiet alone. That turned out to be a mistake. He checked the mailbox at the curb and grabbed the mail, then made the poor choice to open 2 envelopes marked overdue right there on the front. The embarrassment hit him like a slap. He stepped inside the house, opened both notices, and stared at them. $1,500. That's what they needed to pay off those 2 bills by the end of the month. Where the hell was he supposed to find that kind of money? Rick walked past the fridge, ignoring the 2 cans of cheap lager inside, and reached up to the high cabinet above the stove. That's where they kept the bottle of bourbon they only ever pulled out when Stacy's father, the Colonel, came over. The first sip hit him like a wave. An overwhelming mix of hopelessness and sadness spread through his chest. He took a second drink. Rick had been thinking about this moment for months. He knew the reasons. He knew the method. The only thing he hadn't settled on until tonight was the timing. Why? The main reason? Rick was worth more dead than alive. The Wilsons were drowning financially. But if he died, the life insurance payout could give Stacy and Amy a chance to reset, maybe even breathe again. And the other reason? Life just didn't feel worth it anymore. Rick felt like Sisyphus, constantly pushing a rock uphill, only for it to tumble back down, over and over again. It used to feel bearable when Stacy was beside him, when her smile and affection helped to lighten the load. But for the past 6 months, he'd been alone with that rock. As for how to do it, well, it didn't have to look like self-destruction. That was important for 2 reasons. First, because the thought of Amy growing up and someday learning her father had taken his own life made his stomach turn. Second, because if it wasn't ruled a self-destruction, his life insurance would pay out twice as much. The perfect answer had been right in front of him all along. Every day on his drive to and from the city, Rick passed a stretch of road locals called Suicide Curve. It got the name after 2 different cars had gone off the edge and plunged into the gorge below. It was a dangerous bend in the old road that connected downtown to their neighborhood. Years ago, the city built an alternate route, since the highway department couldn't figure out how to make the curve safer. They even considered closing the road entirely, but residents pushed back. The new route added 12 extra minutes to the commute, and no one wanted to deal with that. So the city compromised. They kept the road open, added some flimsy fencing, and slapped a 15 miles per hour sign on the curve. All that was left to figure out now was when. And after that second sip of bourbon, Rick answered the question in his head. There's no time like the present. Maybe he said it out loud, maybe not. Either way, no one else was in the kitchen to hear it. He grabbed the keys to his pickup. It wouldn't take much. The barriers were weak, and the drop was steep. It would look like a tragic accident. Clean, simple. But as he opened the front door, he hesitated. Wait, does 2 shots of bourbon make me legally drunk? Would that show up in a toxicology report? Would that jeopardize the insurance payout? Too risky. He turned around, headed back inside, stumbled into the bathroom, and threw up in the toilet. Then he rinsed out his mouth, washed the glass he used, and put it back exactly where it was. 10 minutes later, Rick sat in the driver's seat of his truck, engine running, staring straight ahead at the deadly curve, trying to summon the nerve to end it. At that exact moment, Stacy had taken a different route home, a shortcut she rarely used. She decided to cut through the old road to save a few minutes. As she eased around a curve, she spotted Rick's truck on the opposite side. Why the hell is he here? She thought. This road wasn't on the way to her mom's house. Rick's truck started creeping forward just as she laid on the horn. He didn't react at first. His foot shifted from the brake to the gas. The truck inched ahead. Then his brain caught up to the noise, and his eyes snapped into focus. He saw the car heading toward him. He slammed the brake. Why is Stacy's car here? What's she doing here? He looked out the open window and saw her pull up beside him, visibly alarmed. Rick! She shouted. What are you doing out here? He didn't answer. He looked dazed, like he was waking up from anesthesia. He just stared at her, not really hearing the words. Where's Amy? She asked, panic rising in her voice. A sickening thought slammed into her, and she jumped out of her car. She ran straight to the truck, yanked open the door, and looked inside. Rick still said nothing. He just stared at her, eyes glassy as if in a trance. He looked at her dress, at her face, so beautiful, even now. His silence said more than words. Richard, she said gently, but firmly, let's go home. We need to talk. She didn't wait for him to respond. She turned around, walked back to her car, and got in. Rick sat frozen for a moment longer. Then, slowly, he put the truck into gear, turned around, and followed his wife home. As soon as Stacy stepped inside the house, she headed straight to the bedroom to change. About 5 minutes later, she came into the kitchen where Rick was sitting at the table, staring blankly at his coffee. She pulled out her phone and quickly called her mother. Mom, can you keep Amy tonight, please? She sat down, barely able to look at Rick. Before she could say a word, he spoke first. You looked nice tonight. I haven't seen that dress since you were pregnant with Amy. I'm guessing you weren't going to book club. Was it a date? It was time to stop lying. Yes, she said quietly. It was. I'm sorry. Stacy started crying. Rick didn't react. Her tears didn't move him. He wasn't angry, just crushed in a way she had never seen before. Are you leaving? His voice was flat, serious. Stacy realized in that moment just how deep this had gone. Oh God, no, she said, shaken. I don't want to leave. I want to stay, please. I know I messed up. I know things have been awful, and I've been a big part of that. I want to fix this. I want us to fix this. And I swear, I never physically cheated. I never crossed that line. But you were emotionally involved with someone else, weren't you? Stacy nodded slowly. Yes, I was. I'm sorry. I'm ashamed. Tell me everything, Rick said. And tell me who he is. After that, I'll decide if there's still something here to fight for. Stacy told him everything. No sugarcoating, no excuses. She told him how it started, what led her down that path, and what made her stop. Rick sat there in silence and listened to every word. When she finished and offered another tearful apology, she couldn't hold the question back any longer. That's it. Now you know everything. Now it's your turn. Why were you at that curve? Rick looked down for a moment, then told her the truth. How he'd wanted to end it. How he'd planned to drive off the edge that night. As he spoke, Stacy moved across the room and sat on his lap, holding his face in her hands, sobbing into his chest. Rick, please, I love you. Let's start over. Let's try again. Not just to be married, but to be friends. To be in love again. I don't want to live without you. Hearing that helped. Rick wanted the same thing. But he had one question. How do we do that? First, Stacy said, we drop the pride. There's nothing noble about planning to die, and there's no dignity in sneaking off to meet someone in a hotel. So let's not pretend pride's an issue anymore. Okay, so who do we go to for help? Stacy flinched a little when he mentioned the hotel, but she knew she had it coming. My mom, she said. She offered us money before, but we were too stubborn. After Grandpa died, she inherited enough. She's got it sitting in CDs. She said she'd lend it to us with the same interest she gets from the bank, 3%. We wouldn't have to repay the principal until we're on our feet again. We could use most of it to pay off the debts and set some aside for marriage counseling. We need help, Rick. We can't fix this on our own. Rick didn't give her an answer that night. They spent the next week talking, weighing their options. Eventually, they both agreed. If there was going to be any real healing, they needed a professional to help rebuild the trust. Rick didn't know how to move past what Stacy had done, emotionally cheating, getting so close to crossing the physical line. Just picturing her with someone else made his stomach turn. Stacy had her own fears. How could she trust a man who nearly ended his life? Could she rely on him? Could she trust him to be there for her, for Amy? She struggled for a long time with the fear that if one more thing went wrong, Rick might try again. Stacy went back to school Friday morning. By third period, her planning block, everything blew up. Kyle stormed into her classroom, red-faced and furious. He didn't see the two students working on the bulletin board in the back. "Where the hell were you last night?" he snapped. "I sat at that damn table by myself looking like an idiot, and I paid for the hotel room in case you were late." The two girls froze, eyes wide, then bolted from the room. If Kyle had been thinking clearly, he'd have left too, but he didn't. He kept ranting, getting louder, accusing her, ignoring boundaries. Then the assistant principal stepped in, voice sharp and commanding. "Miss Wilson, Mr. Turner, my office, now." Word of the confrontation spread fast. The full story got distorted like a game of telephone, but none of it made Kyle look good. That same day, Danielle Miller decided it was time to drop her little bombshell. She leaked the truth anonymously. Kyle Turner hadn't been Special Forces. He'd served, yes, but as a clerk stationed stateside. No combat, no heroics. When the truth came out, people turned on him fast. No one likes a liar, especially not one who plays soldier. Any sympathy he might have had evaporated overnight. Between the public outburst and the phony war story, Kyle was fired that same day. No protections, no hearing, gone. Stacy faced a warning, nothing more. She hadn't broken any formal rules. To keep things from spiraling further, Stacy's mom stepped in with the loan. They paid off their debts and started counseling. Slowly, they began finding their way back to one another. The turning point came a few months later. Stacy, Rick, and Amy were visiting her parents. Stacy and the colonel were in his office while the rest of the family was in the kitchen. Suddenly, Stacy's voice rang out, loud and angry. "Dad, none of this is Rick's fault. The economy collapsed. Amy came early. He supported me quitting my job and going back to school. He works over 50 hours a week at a job he hates just to keep us going. He's been nothing but a loyal husband and a great father. And if you can't respect that, I feel sorry for you. Say one more nasty thing about him, and you won't see me or your granddaughter again." She stormed out of the office, grabbed Amy from her mom, and turned to Rick. "We're leaving. I can't listen to his crap anymore. I'm sorry, Mom." She buckled Amy into the car and pulled out of the driveway. Rick leaned in, kissed his mother-in-law on the cheek, and followed Stacy with a grin on his face. It was the first time Stacy had publicly defended him, stood up to her father. And it did something to Rick. Something big. His confidence came back. His belief in their future returned. With Stacy's support, Rick started applying for better jobs. 3 months later, he landed one at a growing credit union as head of corporate sales. The economy was recovering, and with base pay plus bonuses, he was making slightly more than he had before he got laid off. 2 years had passed since that life-altering night in Krivaya. Thanks to a strict budget and some hard work, the Wilsons had managed to repay more than half of what they owed Stacy's mom. And after a full year of couples therapy, they had begun to rebuild trust, love, and everything in between. Stacy no longer flinched when Rick left the house with Amy, and Rick no longer felt uneasy when Stacy stayed out late for book club. One evening, Rick walked into the house and immediately smelled his favorite meal simmering on the stove. Amy wasn't home. She was at her grandparents'. The Colonel, these days, had learned to keep his opinions to himself, largely because his wife had laid down the law. "If you think I'm letting you drive our granddaughter away from me, think again," she'd once snapped. He hadn't challenged her since. Stacy gestured to the table. "Rick, sit down. I've been thinking, and I've got it all figured out. I want two things: a second honeymoon and a second baby." Rick blinked. That was not what he expected to hear. "Can we afford that?" Stacy smiled. He hadn't said no, and that was a good start. "I did some research. 6 nights in Jamaica, all inclusive, for under $2,000. What about Amy? Mom said she'll take care of her." Rick grinned. The idea of spending 6 days alone with Stacy, no work, no stress, no toddler meltdowns, sounded like a dream. They hadn't had more than a single night away together since before Amy was born. 4 years ago. "Book it," he said, "unless you already have." "And about the second baby," Stacy hesitated, then pressed on. "We always said we wanted two. I was terrified after everything that happened with Amy, but I spoke to my doctor. She said the risk of another preemie is low, less than 1 in 20. That's pretty normal. Plus, my new insurance is way better than what we had back then. Even if something goes wrong, we're covered." Rick thought for a second. "Can I say yes to the trip now and think about the baby later?" "Of course," Stacy said. And that's how, 4 weeks later, they found themselves on a beach in Jamaica, back where it all began. On the flight, Rick reached for Stacy's hand. "Well, leave the diaphragm at home, babe. Maybe this is the week we get lucky." She couldn't even respond, just kissed him and held on tight. Rick had been wondering if anything could top their honeymoon. He stopped wondering 5 minutes after they hit the beach. Stacy peeled off her top as soon as they hit the lounge chairs. That night, she wore a sundress so hot it could have been banned in 5 states. On the third morning, just after sunrise, she shook Rick awake and dragged him to a quiet, hidden part of the beach. And before he could even process what was happening, she was stripping off both her bikini top and bottom and diving into the warm water. Stunned but thrilled, Rick yanked off his swim trunks and jumped in after her. As they floated in the calm sea, Rick looked at her. "How'd you find this place?" "Janice, that woman I met last night. She and her husband come here all the time. Said mornings are best." "Is this allowed?" "She said as long as you're dressed by 9 when the locals show up, nobody says a thing. But she warned me, keep an eye on your stuff. Apparently, one couple had some kids swipe their swimsuits while they were in the water." That made Rick nervous. "Yeah, let's stay closer to shore, just in case." Stacy giggled and started swimming back on her back. Rick took his time following, more than happy to admire the view. When he caught up, he asked, "Do we need to be out of here before your friend shows up?" "Exactly why I woke you up at dawn," she said, winking. They spent the next 30 minutes skinny dipping, laughing, kissing. By 8:30, they were dressed and jogging back to the resort like naughty teenagers. Back in the room, they showered, dried off, and made their way back to bed. That morning may have been the beginning of their second child, a boy they later named Richard Jr. 8 months after their trip, Stacy was sitting at her desk prepping for her first class of the day when someone stepped into the doorway. She looked up and froze. "Angel Martinez? Hi, Mrs. Wilson. Mind if I come in?" "Of course. What are you doing here?" "I'll be here for the next 12 weeks, student teaching chemistry with Mr. Bowers." Stacy stood up and hugged her former student, though it was a little awkward with her very pregnant belly in the way. "That's amazing. You'll learn a ton from Mr. Bowers, and if you need anything, I'll be here. At least for another couple weeks. Fingers crossed?" Angel laughed. "If I'm being honest, Mrs. Wilson, you look like you could give birth right here." "I know." Stacy smiled. "We're feeling very lucky." And in that moment, what Stacy was really thinking was how lucky she had been. That day, Angel forgot her ethics book and came back to school. That twist of fate had changed everything. As the bell rang and Angel turned to leave, they shared one last hug. "Thank you, Angel," Stacy whispered softly to herself, too quiet for Angel to hear. Years later, the night before Amy's wedding, Stacy sat her daughter down and told her everything. About how close she'd come to cheating. About how the weight of money problems, disappointment, and unmet needs had twisted her thinking. About how she nearly made the worst mistake of her life, and how that moment forced her to wake up and fight for her marriage. She told Amy how hard it had been to earn back trust, how grateful she was that Rick had forgiven her and given their family a second chance. By the end of the conversation, both mother and daughter were hugging, crying together in the dim light. The next morning, just hours before the ceremony, Amy found her dad. "Dad, Mom told me everything. I think she just wanted to make sure I don't make the same mistakes. But there's one thing she couldn't explain: why you didn't leave her." Rick wasn't surprised. Stacy had always been the type to turn her own pain into a lesson, even if it meant making herself vulnerable. "Well," Rick said, "it would have been a whole lot harder if she'd actually gone to that hotel. But she didn't. And she didn't just apologize for almost cheating. She owned up to everything that led there." He paused, looking into his daughter's eyes. "I spent a lot of time thinking about what life would have looked like without her. Without you. I know I'd be alone. And I'd be miserable. Instead, I've had 20 amazing years. More happiness than I probably deserve, considering how close I came to throwing it all away." "What do you mean?" Rick smiled gently. "Let's save that story for another day. Today's about your wedding, not your father's screw-ups. But I promise, someday we'll sit down, have a drink, and I'll tell you why your mom's the best thing that ever happened to me." Amy didn't love the answer, but she nodded, and silently, she made a promise to herself. One day, she'd buy her dad that drink and ask him for the full story. Rick, meanwhile, wondered if he'd ever have the courage to tell her the part no one else knew. How, just days after Stacy confessed everything, he had broken down Kyle Turner's apartment door, fully ready to beat the man senseless, only to find the place empty. Turner had skipped town, and somehow that made it easier to let go and finally start again.